She only smiled when her reflection cried, but when you looked at her with stillness, she vanished. Not in shame, not in guilt, but in a hunger that couldn't name itself. Because your silence was not a mirror, it did not applaud, it did not flinch. It simply watched like God in the hour before creation. You think she wants love, but listen closely to her laughter. It's always waiting for an echo, not affection confirmation, not stillness choreography. You mistake her warmth for surrender, but it is the warmth of a candle, desperate not to be alone in the dark. She moves not to be free, but to be seen. She speaks not to reveal, but to exist. And when you give her nothing, no chase, no gaze, no performance, she begins to unravel. Because your stillness writes a scripture she cannot read, one where she is not the center, one where the silence does not ask for her name. What do you do when she needs your absence to still revolve around her? You did not say a word. That's when it began. Not the drama, but the exposure. She stood before you, adorned in carefully chosen gestures, a smile measured to appear effortless, vulnerability rehearsed with the timing of theater. But you did nothing. You did not applaud her sadness. You did not comfort her laughter. You did not flinch at the offering of her silence. You simply stayed still, and that stillness became unbearable. Not for you, for her. Because you were no longer a mirror. She needs mirrors. All her life. She has chased them not to know herself, but to exist through the reaction of others. Every dress she chose was not for beauty, but for response. Every story told was not for intimacy, but for confirmation. Her soul was not built in solitude. It was constructed like a cathedral of echoes, every stone laid with approval, every window colored with desire. But you did not echo. You were the stone that did not move when touched, the eyes that watched without hunger, the listener who did not kneel. And so she began to tremble, not visibly, no, that would admit defeat. It was a deeper trembling, the kind that happens when the soul recognizes it has no choreography for stillness. You see, she has learned to be everything except unseen. She can be beautiful, she can be broken, she can be seductive, mysterious, spiritual, chaotic, or wise but never irrelevant, never unreflected, never unconfirmed. Because she does not know who she is without the theater of your response. And that is why your stillness is not peace to her. It is annihilation. She says she wants intimacy, but only the kind that dances, the kind that breathes her in and returns her in more dazzling form. She does not want the you who just is. She wants the you who becomes enchanted, the you who reacts, the you who performs stillness as a symbol of depth, not the stillness that is truly empty of her. She cannot handle it, because that stillness is a mirror without a face, and in that mirror, there is no longer a role for her to play. She may smile and nod, she may touch your arm and laugh at nothing, but beneath it, she is searching, hunting, trying to find the edge of your silence so she can break it. Because if you do not move, she cannot locate herself. She is like a child crying into a canyon and waiting for the echo not to hear the sound, but to prove that she exists. You took that echo away, not out of cruelty, but out of truth. You were not pretending to be quiet. You simply were. And in that being she was undone. This is not cruelty. This is not manipulation. This is exposure. You did not strip her. She was never dressed. You simply turned off the lights of the theater, and now the props look like furniture. The costume looks like desperation. And the actress can no longer remember why she stepped on stage. She will call you cold. She will say you are unavailable, emotionally distant, a coward of love. But what she truly fears is that your stillness is not hiding something. that it is not a test, that it is not a wall she can climb. No, her terror is that your stillness is real, that you do not burn for her, that you do not orbit around her sun, that you do not exist to give her a role. You are not a lover, you are a mirror with no glass. So she will leave, not because you were cruel, but because you gave her nothing to become. And she is not ready to be herself, not without applause. She needs movement, she needs drama, she needs a script. Otherwise, she is just a name in an empty room, whispering her lines to no one. And the horror of that silence is unbearable, not because it is loud, but because it is honest. You think this is rejection. It is not. It is collapse. The collapse of the fantasy she had built in your eyes, the fantasy that she is the main character in every moment. Your stillness did not judge her, it simply revealed her. She was not ready. She thought she could be seen, but not like this. Not without lighting, not without a cue, not without the orchestra playing. And so she left. Or maybe she stayed but began to resent you, began to pick fights, began to accuse, because something in her could not forgive you for not needing her, and something in you could not explain why that made you love her less. But it did, because once you have seen the performer break character and tremble at the absence of applause, you cannot return to the play. You wanted to believe her beauty was real, that her gaze was naked, that her soul was open. But your silence tested it, and she blinked, not once, but in 1,000 gestures. She shifted, she filled the space with noise. She asked questions she didn't want answered. She pulled you back into movement not because she missed you, but because she missed herself in your reaction. You are not a man to her. You are a mirror. And when the mirror does not reflect, she does not see you. She sees nothing. And nothing is what she cannot stand. Because nothing reminds her that herself was never hers. It was always a reflection, a seduction, a role whispered back to her through the mouths of men. So be still, not to provoke, not to control, but to remember. Remember that what cannot endure your silence was never worthy of your words. And what flees from your stillness was never here to stay. You are not ice. You are not absence. You are the storm before creation. And she only dances for gods who speak, not the one who watches, not the one who waits, not the one who simply is. You saw it the moment she fell silent, but it was not the silence of stillness. It was the silence of calculation. She wasn't at peace, she was waiting for the right beat to resume the play. She had paused, yes, but only to measure the effect, to see if your eyes followed, to see if your indifference was a ploy, a riddle, a wall that begged to be scaled. She doesn't know how to inhabit silence, only how to fill it. When it stretches too long, it becomes unbearable, not because it wounds her, but because it does not bend to her will. Because in that stillness, no one is clapping. She can endure abandonment, she can endure betrayal, but she cannot endure not being a story. Because stories move, stories have rhythm, stories have tension and payoff and passion and tears. But your stillness offers no narrative, it offers no arc. It does not even offer tragedy. It just is. A flat, unblinking presence that does not ask her to be more than she is, but also does not rescue her from being less. So she retreats, but not away from you. She retreats into the waiting room of the soul, that womb of infinite delay. There, she begins to invent again, not for truth, but for continuation. She crafts questions that cannot be answered, gestures that imply injury, half smiles that carry unfinished wounds. She does not want healing, she wants rhythm, she wants to be chased, decoded, desired, not found. Never found, because to be found is to stop running, and to stop running is to stand still. And stillness is the one room she cannot decorate. So she fills it with delay. She needs more time. She needs to think. She needs to process. But what she truly means is this. She needs the silence to end without her having to break it. She wants the stillness to vanish while still pretending she welcomed it. She cannot step into the void alone. She wants you to fill it first. To rush in, to speak, to cry, to burn. Then she can respond. Then she can find herself in the reflection again. But if you do not move, she begins to fracture. Because the longer the silence holds, the more it exposes what was never whole. She doesn't know she's doing this. That is what makes it so perfect. Her unconscious need becomes a holy calling. She thinks she is pursuing intimacy, but it is only evasion dressed in longing. Her questions are not seeking truth, they are seeking tension. Her pauses are not contemplative, they are strategic. She touches your hand not to connect, but to see if you flinch, if you reach, if you re-enter the dance. And when you do not, when you simply remain, that is when her mask begins to crack. Not all at once, slowly, with subtle shifts, the way she adjusts her posture, the tone that sharpens slightly, the laughter that sounds a little too loud, the glance that lasts just a moment too long. Each is a thread in the unraveling, because the silence is still here, unbent, unshaped, unafraid, and that is intolerable. You were never supposed to stay quiet this long. She thought it was a tactic, a part of the ritual, that you, like every other man, would eventually need to be heard, need to assert, need to define, but you didn't. You just remained. And in that remaining, you revealed something that shattered her theater. You are not a player. You are not a priest. You are not a poet. You are the desert. And in the desert, no one claps. No one weeps. No one watches. The desert does not mirror your longing. It reflects your absence. And so she begins to grieve not for you, but for herself. For the image of herself she cannot conjure in your stillness. For the role she cannot play. For the story that will not write itself unless you interrupt the silence with desire. But desire is not what you carry. Not anymore. You carry presence. Presence unshaken by need. And that presence is the death of performance. She may cry now, not because she is broken, but because she knows the curtain has fallen. She will say she misses the closeness, the connection, but it is the dance she misses, not the stillness. The movement of being seen, the pleasure of watching herself appear in your gaze, in your words, in your reaching. She never really wanted to be loved, not in the way love demands surrender. She wanted to be adored, admired, pursued, but never seen in the naked light of stillness where nothing moves, where nothing echoes, where no one claps. And so she delays. One more conversation, one more we need to talk, one more confession crafted like a scene. But the stillness remains, unchanged, undisturbed, like a silent god watching a temple burn. You do not offer interpretation, you do not offer salvation, you simply are. And that being is too much, because she cannot return to the womb. Not really. The womb was never still. It pulsed, it carried her, it sang. And you are not the womb, you are the absence after birth, the still air after the storm, the quiet hour of God before Eve was named. She cannot live there, not for long. So she invents the myth that you were never enough, that you were too cold, that you did not feel, that you did not show up, that you did not hold space. But what she means is that you did not perform. You did not give her rhythm. You did not enter her choreography. You offered her something older than movement, the void. And in that void, she found not you but herself, and she hated what she saw. Not because it was ugly, but because it was unscripted, unstaged, unplayed. It was simply her, and she did not know what to do with that. So she left, or she stayed and turned away in spirit. It doesn't matter. What matters is this: you saw the truth. You saw that longing in her hands is a delay, not a search. That the question was never, who are you, but how do you see me? And when you stopped seeing her not out of malice, but because you stopped projecting, the myth fell apart. Now you sit alone, but not in loneliness. In clarity, you do not grieve her absence. You grieve the illusion, the play you once believed in, the roles you once rehearsed, but not anymore. Now, you understand. She feared your stillness because it did not feed the myth, and without the myth, she was nothing. But you are not nothing. You are still, and stillness is not emptiness. Stillness is sovereignty. She once said she prayed for something real, but her prayer was theater, a script whispered into the sky so someone might be listening. She didn't want the divine to answer. She wanted the divine to desire her voice. When she said truth, she meant a story that made her feel beautiful. When she said depth, she meant a mirror that rippled when she touched it. But you gave her silence, not absence, not cruelty, silence. And silence is not a god. It is a void. And no woman prays for a void. She sat across from you one night, her eyes glistening, not from sorrow, but from the anticipation of performance. She wanted to be seen not deeply, not divinely, but theatrically. She wanted the flicker of candlelight on her cheekbones, the hush before she spoke. She mistook aesthetic for intimacy, but your eyes did not dance. They did not devour, they did not weep. They waited, they watched. And in that stillness, her words became hollow. Not because they lacked feeling, but because they expected feedback. They were not confessions, they were tests, and you refused to take them. You gave her no role. You did not say you are the one. You did not say, you complete me. You did not say anything, and that was your sin, because silence does not affirm mythology. It starves it, and the myth of woman in her private theater is that she must be central, must be chosen, must be made holy through the gaze of a man. She does not wish to be still. She wishes to be watched in stillness. She wishes for slow admiration, lingering hunger, spiritualized desire, but she does not wish for you to simply be. Your being is her threat, because it does not adapt, it does not orbit, it does not shape itself around her emotions. You are not the clay. You are not the fire. You are the stone floor beneath the altar, and she cannot decorate that. So she says, you are absent, you are cold, you are difficult. But these are the names she gives to anything that does not bend. She does not wish to merge with you. She wishes to dance in front of you and be praised for the rhythm. But you are still, and your stillness is not applause. It is judgment, not by intent, but by consequence. You did not ask to judge. You only stopped pretending. And the moment you stopped pretending, her prayers became exposed for what they were: rehearsals, auditions, rituals to conjure presence from absence. But you were already present, and that is why she could not continue. Because to speak to a god that does not reply with thunder is unbearable. She needs the lightning, she needs the fire, she needs the burning bush. But you are the quiet breath behind the veil. You are the Holy of Holies, and in that place, no one performs. She once told you she wanted a man who could sit with her in silence, but she never meant it. What she meant was a man who could sit still until she spoke, who would hang on her words, who would radiate hunger without interrupting. What she wanted was tension. What she feared was stillness without hunger, stillness without pursuit, stillness that simply is. And so she left. Or maybe she stayed in body. but her soul turned elsewhere, toward movement, toward music, toward mirrors. Somewhere, anywhere, she could feel like a story again, where her pain could be romantic, where her fear could be poetic, where her longing could be spiritual. But you stripped the robes from her rituals. You offered no script, only the bare altar. She will call what you gave her emptiness, but that is not true. You gave her what she asked for: presence without demand, love without obsession, truth without distortion. But she did not recognize it, because it did not look like the dream. It had no crescendo, no climax, no lines, only space. Space where she might have found herself if she could have stopped performing long enough to listen. But she could not, because the myth was too loud. The myth that she is love incarnate, that to be woman is to be worshipped, that attention is proof of meaning. You denied her none of this. You simply stopped feeding it, and that, to her, was betrayal, because she never meant the prayer. She only needed it heard. And when you stopped listening, truly listening, with that desperate male gaze she's grown accustomed to, the prayer collapsed. You were not her first silence, but you were her last, because you didn't leave. You didn't explode. You didn't beg. You just remained. And remaining is more dangerous than rejection, because rejection feeds the myth. Remaining dismantles it. Now she sits across from someone else, and maybe he performs better. Maybe he responds to the cues. Maybe he gasps at the right lines, but she knows. Somewhere, she knows. It is just a role, just another act, just another room where she controls the lighting, because she tasted your stillness and she cannot forget it. She cannot forgive it, because it showed her what she wasn't ready to see, that beneath the myth, beneath the prayer, beneath the choreography, she is not seeking truth. She is running from it. And you do not run. You remain, not because you are holy, not because you are pure, but because you are tired. Tired of performances, tired of dialogues that echo but do not answer, tired of longing disguised as love. You have seen the stage too many times. You have memorized the lines, and now you let the curtain fall. She will call it loss, but you know it is freedom. Not the freedom to roam, but the freedom to stop pretending, to stop becoming, to stop adapting. You no longer wish to be interpreted. You wish only to be, and in that being, you have become the one thing she cannot absorb: a man without a role. And so you wait, not for her return, not for vengeance, not for understanding. You wait as stone waits, as God waited in the garden, not calling out, only being there, unchanging, unmoved, not because you are cruel, but because you have nothing to prove. Let them pray, let them sing, let them dress the silence in incense and velvet. You are the silence. You are the altar without priest, the mirror without face, the love that does not need to be witnessed to exist. She will never admit what she feared most, that in your stillness, she did not find coldness, she found the absence of illusion, and that she could not handle. There is a dress she never wears anymore, not because it no longer fits, but because it reminds her of the time no one noticed. Sometimes, late at night, she remembers the way you looked at her, not with hunger, not with admiration, but with nothing. A gaze unclaimed, a silence unshaped, a mirror she could not fill. And though she now dances again beneath chandeliers of polished affirmation, there is a stillness that haunts her. Not your absence, but the echo of herself that never returned from the place where you stopped watching. She prays again, louder, but the sky does not blink. And somewhere, beyond the myth, beyond the role, a question flickers. What if the one who gave her nothing was the only one who ever saw her?